Okay, now it's working. Welcome, everyone, and thank you for joining us on this panel. This panel, ladies and gentlemen, is going to be discussing a topic that is very, very intriguing, yet very scary to me at the same time. We're going to be discussing machines, brains, and the future of intelligence. Now, the convergence of technology and biology is definitely reshaping how we perceive and harness reasoning abilities. And we're going to be discussing how machines and brains are coalescing to shape the future of intelligence. Now, I cannot be discussing this topic with you all without bringing up Elon Musk's Neuralink. And this is the most recent successful feat in this field. Elon Musk's Neuralink, back in February, I believe, successfully implanted a wireless chip in a human brain. And according to Elon Musk himself, who spoke very recently also after February, this human who has a chip in their brain can now control a computer mouse only using their brain. You see why I'm saying it's pretty scary, yet pretty intriguing. And now with this panel of wonderful experts, we're going to be talking about all things machines, brains, AI, and the future of intelligence. Antoine, I wanted to start with you. It's a pretty outlandish feat, what we're talking about here, like almost like a sci-fi movie. And I know you've been in the AI space since '98, so that's more than 20 years ago. You've also built companies, and you were part of the company that essentially brought us Siri. So this is a very interesting part of your experience that I wanted to highlight here. But according to you, and when I spoke to you about Neuralink, you said, Lenah, this is not the first time or the first company that has done such a thing. So I wanted you to share with our audience some of the similar feats that have been done by companies in the field of machinery and brains or biology in general.
Yeah, thank you. And it's great to be here. Indeed, the first company that actually put an implant into someone's brain did it in 2004. That's 20 years ago. Obviously, it's deep research. And since then, I think that company is called BlackRock Neurotech. It's out in Salt Lake City. They've done more than 30 such implants. And what's interesting is that it actually works. It works for its intended purpose, which is to try to understand what goes on in the brain through an array, understand what brainwave drive what kind of behavior or intended behavior, and based on this, provide for an interpretation of that brain and actuate. And so it's fantastic that Neuralink was able to get somebody to drive a mouse, but I can tell you that some of these companies that I've looked into as an investor, they were able to do a lot greater things. For example, I remember somebody who was able to actually drive a car. Now, of course, they didn't let that person on the road, okay? But that person was able to drive a car in simulation.
Wow.
And that takes quite a bit of work. So it's just a beginning, but if you're paraplegic, from the neck on down, being able to write on a computer, being able to play a video game, being able to move a mouse, it makes a huge difference.
And Usama, as an expert on experiential AI, and for those who don't know, experiential AI is basically, and how you said it to me, is AI with a human in the loop. In your view, can machines have reasoning like humans do?
Can machines? Maybe one day they could. Today, at least, given the state of the art of the technology, there is no such thing as reasoning. What we're seeing with generative AI, as impressive as it is nothing more than kind of a very fancy autocomplete on the prompt. It sees a prompt, it says what's the most likely completion. And if you change the prompt a bit, this is one of the problems, the result could be very, very different. It could go off on different tangent. We call these things, the technical term is they are stochastic parrots. They are parrots because they don't understand what they're saying, which is a prerequisite for reasoning. It's stochastic because sometimes you get different results depending on
what the human
machine,
inputs.
well, what the human input for sure, but also the machine, which path it takes, because it has many kind of sometimes random paths it could follow. So we believe in the AI with the human in the loop because what is not really emphasized enough, in my opinion, out there is how much intervention and course correction the technologies you see and that impress you a lot in demos, and we can talk about the gap between demos and reality, but these demos, they require a heck of a lot of guidance. As of today, there is no kind of set it and forget it AI. If you don't continuously do course correction and intervention, very quickly it becomes kind of irrelevant, wrong, not useful. So I say one day, because the field has been striving for a long time, and we'll talk about this some more, on trying to figure out what is reasoning. How do humans do it? And it's been a hard problem.
Yeah. Antoine, I want to give you the same question because I know you have a quite different opinion. Can machines have reasoning like humans do, in your view?
Yeah, so first, let's remember that everything that has happened in the last 2 or 3 years in so-called generative AI is an accident. There was no forecast. Nobody had a grand plan to build generative AI. LLMs are an accident of Silicon Valley, where lots of folks tinker, and when you have lots of folks tinker for a while, eventually something comes out of it. And LLMs came out of it. But LLMs, what are LLMs good at? Very good interface. They're good knowledge regurgitator. They are not reasoning engines, for sure not. In fact, you probably know this story where somebody was able to make an LLM say 1 + 1 = 3. Now, of course, we know that it's not true, and yet a machine, in this case, said that 1 + 1 = 3. So why is this? It is this because effectively these engines are statistical in nature. So how do we get machines to reason? I believe it's possible that we can get machines to reason. The way to get machines to reason is for them to experience the world like we do. LLMs learn on text today. There's very little knowledge, in fact, almost no knowledge today by machines that is done off of video. Now think about it. The way that we humans learn is not via text. Maybe 5% of our life we learn on text. We read a book, we go to school, do some homework, okay, that's text. But most of our learning is sound-enabled 3D video, right? This life. Yeah. For the moment we're born, right? Until the moment we die.
I love how you called life sound-enabled 3D video.
Right, that's what it is. That's what it is. And we experience it. And that experience teaches us a lot of things. For example, it teaches us the value and importance of time.
Yes.
Try to understand time with text. So, and when I understand time, so if I see a car and a pedestrian on a certain trajectory, and I have seen it before in a movie that if that happens, well, there is a collision, then I will articulate in my brain that perhaps I should tell the pedestrian to stop, right? Until and unless you've actually seen it, then can you plan for it? And I think that's the issue. It's very hard for machines to learn on video today. It's very hard. There's a lot of research that's happening today in the space. It will be a while until that happens, but when it happens, I think we'll begin to see machines being able to understand time, therefore sequence, therefore planning, and eventually we might be able to call this reasoning.
So,
yeah, go ahead.
I could probably add a little bit to what Antoine said, which is, I fully agree that they need to go through experiences if we want them to do human intelligence. Now, we may not care. I mean, in some cases, machine intelligence is superior to human intelligence. Machines can play chess better than the best humans on Earth, and probably we'll never beat them. But some of the stuff Antoine said is kind of a bit of a sleight of hand here, right? Because if you talk about multimodal, and you say a machine can get text, can get images, can get audio, how we get text. Remember, to a machine today, the text is not even words. It's not even characters. It's tokens. A typical word in English is about 2 to 3 tokens, right? So it's a completely different thing, whatever the machine is seeing. Similarly, when you give it an image, it sees a bunch of pixels. You here don't see a bunch of pixels. What you see, and what he said, for example, that I've seen images where a human and a car are heading towards each other and a bad outcome will come. For that machine to understand this is a human and this is a car and they're heading towards each other, that's an impossibility today. It can perceive a bunch of pixels and say, okay, this scene is similar to something I've seen before, and here is what's likely to happen. A very, very different modality. How they hear sound is very different. Again, not necessarily worse, but different.
And
So
by the way,
obviously-
and
yeah,
sorry to
go
interrupt,
ahead,
but by the way, I agree with that. In other words, when we say learning on video, we don't mean learning the statistical pixel extrapolation of machines today. We're talking about learning and applying semantics to video, which is what humans do. But semantic learning on video is something that's very hard to do and will take a very long time to be done.
So obviously machines cannot have real life experiences like humans, we can agree. But at the same time, a lot of things are done by machines in a better capacity or just better than human beings. But is there a real need for us to bring both together and create these supercharged, super machine brains as humankind? And if you feel there is a need, what is the goal? Is external use of AI, like we're doing now, and we're very impressed, is that not enough? Do we need a super machine-powered brain? Usama?
So the way I see it is, I think the potential of human-assisted machine intelligence coupled with machine-assisted human intelligence, that is the super phenomenal thing that would allow us to do amazing things. This is, by the way, no different than a human figuring out that, hey, I can build a car that's faster than the horse. I can build an airplane that's faster than any bird. I can use power machinery and do stuff that requires thousands of humans otherwise. This is yet another tool. It happens to touch some of the activities we consider intellectual. But if you ask me, a lot of these activities are not necessarily that intellectual. We have created a knowledge economy around us, which is filled with repetitive, robotic, frankly, very boring tasks that machines can probably do a good job in accelerating significantly. And this is where I think the payoff is between the interaction between the human and the machine intelligence.
So you're now discussing the role that you believe AI will be playing in the future of intelligence, which is basically the knowledge economy, in the knowledge economy.
Yeah. So my belief right now, given where we are today, and by the way, this field has been going around for 70 years, and some argue for 100 years, pre-computers even. But what is different this time around is we have evolved a knowledge economy which is mostly digitized, so everything is within reach of that computer. And we have evolved it in such a way that many of the tasks are really repetitive and kind of robotic. Therefore, while the technology itself today, intelligence today, if people talk about generative AI, for example, scientifically not that interesting. There's probably a couple of deep scientific questions, probably too deep to discuss with the audience right now, but happy to discuss it offline. But other than that, the interest is economic, right? It's one thing to have a better chess player. That has not many economic consequences. It's a whole other thing when you create something that's capable of addressing the knowledge economy, speeding it up between 25 to 80%, 90%, depending on the task. And countries like the US, the knowledge economy is over 50% of the US economy. So even if the speed up is 1%, 1% of the US, 0.5% of the US economy you cannot ignore, let alone 50 to 80%. that is going to be tremendous economic value. And as boring as the technology is, and as lacking in intelligence as it is, you cannot ignore the economic impact, which is why the story is different.
So speaking basically about the mundane robotic tasks that AI really does help human beings accomplish and gives space for our real non-microchipped brains to think about more creative things to benefit our jobs and mankind. But Antoine, I wanted you to provide us, if you can, with some metrics about what Usama was talking about here. So these tasks that AI can do for human beings, what kind of role does it make AI play in the future of intelligence, in your view?
Yeah, first, it's clear that we, the human species, are in a business of self-augmentation for a long time. I'm wearing glasses. Wearing glasses, that's self-augmentation. You know, I drive a car, I use a forklift. Those are all self-augmentation. And we're very good at that. Now, the difference with AI this time is that, as Usama said rightfully, is that we're beginning to augment our capabilities to do mundane, white-collar type things very, very quickly and very effortlessly. Give an example. I'm an investor in a company in the Bay Area that does accounting. And so you'd think, okay, accounting is a very boring business. But you know, in the US, you have millions of accountants and that serve tens of millions of people, high net worth, SMEs, large corporates. A lot of these tasks are highly repetitive. They're the same every year. You file taxes. And they actually are able to be AI augmented. And so not everything today, but a good subsection of that can be. And for example, this company that I have invested in is gobbling up, is buying small and medium-sized accounting firms, and as it buys them, it retrofits their entire workflow so that the EBITDA goes from an average of 15-20% to more than 60% over 6 months.
Wow.
And you can imagine that when you go from 15-20% to 60%, and today it's 60%, in 2 years it's probably going to be 70-80%, right? So when you do that, then of course what you're doing is you're creating the competition to the Ernst & Young and the Deloitte of the world, but out of left field, okay? And I think you will see a lot of legacy, especially around enterprise productivity side. You'll see a lot of legacy businesses being disrupted this way, or augmented this way.
Antoine, you told me something interesting before our panel here, is that back to the idea of convergence of technology and biology. You said AI was originally not meant to get into this, kind of field, is what you believe. But having said that, do you think it's a very positive feat to undergo this convergence?
So, I'm not sure that I should just be, screaming on top of my head that it's great to put, brain implants into folks. That's not necessarily the idea. By the way, today, if you're trying to do that, you need an FDA waiver. So the FDA has to tell you that this particular case is so extreme that the only way to augment that person is actually to do that, right? So it's not that simple, and it's going to be friction-full for a long time. So don't run for the doors just yet.
I'm not running.
But once we figure that out, and we figure that out in ways that are ethically correct, where the privacy of individuals is protected, where the privacy, because you're tapping into people's thought, right? So it's quite important. So once we figure out ways to do that properly, I'd say, why not? Why should I not be able to drive my car if I want to drive? It will be driven by AI, so maybe that doesn't matter very much. But let's say put together a PowerPoint eventually using my brain without using my hands. Eventually we'll get there. This is not today. Maybe 20 years out, maybe 50 years out, maybe not in my lifetime. But why not? If we can give people that power, why not?
Usama, do you share the same views? Do you think that this is a positive feat? And Antoine mentioned privacy, and we were talking about some fears and worries that many people can have undergoing this operation, I'm going to call it, because you're basically, inserting something in the human body. what are some of the fears and worries that maybe you personally have or that you think need to be addressed? And do you think it's a positive feat to converge the two?
Yeah, I think, humanity, I wake up one day and I'm hopeful, I wake up the other day and I'm completely depressed.
Yeah.
Because we are amazing also, not at just augmenting ourselves, but figuring out kind of how to use stuff badly, right? You can start out with something where Antoine correctly said, we have to be careful, we have to figure out the privacy issue and so forth. But now let's say we all have these chips implanted somewhere, and in your brain now you can't take it out, and you're dependent on it. Well, guess what? It is tracking you. It is tracking potentially your intentions. It is tracking your emotions. It takes the whole idea of social scoring that's happening in China to 100, 1,000-fold kind of worse ways of assessing. So it's not necessarily a world I'd like to live in. However, so that would be my concern. It's not the technology, it's actually the privacy and the abuse. But going back to the beautiful example Antoine used in accounting, I often use, so I get asked this question all the time, which is, will AI replace my job? And my answer is automatically no, but a human using AI will replace your job if you're not using AI. Now, let's take the example of accounting. Think about an accountant of 60 years ago. What did they do? Right? They had to be very good at manipulating these big ledgers. They had to have good handwriting, good addition skills in their heads, a lot of patience, because if they made an error in the books and they had to go back and trace it and think of how much money is wasted on going back and fixing some financials prepared by hand, right? Computers came and completely, none of those skills I just mentioned are relevant today to an accountant, right? Here's a question. Do we have less or more accountants today than we did 60 years ago? And the answer is, we have more accountants today than in the history of human civilization.
Really?
Because it democratized the function.
Oh, yeah.
It became relevant to small groups, to small companies, to departments, much more useful. Fixing the robotic stuff became just press a button and redo the financial statements, right? Instant. All of that was a positive and created much higher value jobs. And we have evidence for this. It's very clear. It's in front of you. I think when you bring in AI, and Antoine is, of course, focused on it brings the EBITDA, way up for an accounting firm, guess what? It just means now the accountants will function at an even higher level of value add to the business. And I predict it's not going to replace accountants, but it will replace a lot of that work that today, despite all the digitization, despite all the software packages that capture the IFRS and everything, they'll be adding more value on top of that, and the accountant will be much more valuable to the business, as an example.
Yeah, very interesting insights. God knows we all need accounting, so the job is the function is gonna stay with us for a long time. Antoine, I wanted to ask you this question, and I think a lot of our audience members will want to know. Do you think AI will commoditize the application of knowledge, much like Wikipedia and Google have? And we can draw a lot of similarities between these two mega tech companies and AI, who have, in their own right, commoditized the application of knowledge. So do you think AI can do that or will do that?
Well, it is doing that already. So the cost of access to knowledge is going down dramatically. And so it is pushing folks towards less knowledge-intensive jobs, but more synthetical thought, analytical thought, reasoning, and decision-making jobs, right? So, is it a good thing? On balance, for humanity, it's a great thing. As each time you lower the cost of being productive, you increase the capacity of society to generate high value, or higher value, and higher order types of jobs and opportunities. So the answer is yes, and the consequences of that, I think, are great for us. And so we used to farm, then we went into factories, and we went into desk jobs where we're accountants, maybe lower level accountants. But now we can do other things that are much more productive. And I'd rather do things that are much more productive with my brain than just farming. And I think that's our logical progression.
And Usama, do you think it will commoditize the application of knowledge in the same huge scope that Wikipedia and Google have?
For sure, it makes knowledge more accessible. Now the question is, what should be your skills in a world that is like that? Where you can have access, you can ask the right questions, and you can quickly interpret. And this is, I'll share with you a study I was talking about this morning, we got involved with. Many companies now are beginning to ask the right question, which is, okay, this AI is great, but how much benefit, how much economic benefit does it give? And we were using the example of programming, right? So you all heard about Copilot for code, and programmers are going to be extinct and all of that. The answer here was very interesting. I actually thought, going into it, that programming is, once Microsoft acquired GitHub, which is a repository of, hundreds of millions of programs, teaching a machine how to write Python code or Java code should be a heck of a lot easier than teaching it how to speak English or some natural language. I was wrong on many fronts, right? One is, turns out language is a lot easier than code, because I could say stuff here with a lot of errors and you guys interpret it in your amazing, intelligent brains and correct for all of that. It doesn't work like that in code. But here's an interesting statistic for you. I thought it would speed up programmers by 80%. The findings were, and this is done at a large scale, if you are a programmer with very high skills in programming, the speed up is between 60 and 80%. I usually call it 70%. So 70% speed up. Your market value as a programmer just went up by 70% if you use these tools. If you are not that skilled a programmer, it turns out that using the tool slows you down and you're better off not using it at all, because trying to figure out what the machine produced, debug it, fix it, and by the way, you always have to check what it produces and fix it. That takes you way longer than trying to come up with it laboriously on your own. So it creates a whole new dynamic, which, to answer your question, where skill is going to become more important.
Yep.
Your skill as a doctor, your skill as a nurse, your skill as a scientist, in how to use these tools and how to kind of leverage that augmentation will become kind of the big player. And it will definitely commoditize kind of raw knowledge. Like, who wouldn't? I would love to have my own personal AI that essentially captures everything I go through, and I can search it anytime.
In my brain, or not?
Well, I wouldn't go to my brain. I'm fine talking to it or typing something. And sometimes typing is way faster than even thinking. But here's what I would say. I mean, I happen to be an academic and a pack rat also. So I still carry, and I've carried them across continents, all my books from college, and I spent 9 years in college getting 5 degrees. All my class notes are still somewhere in some filing cabinet. I wish they were accessible for me, my own stuff, through a personalized AI, right? That's amazing, and I think we'll get there. I think those things are doable.
That's a very nice closing remarks, but I'm going to close with Antoine here. You've built businesses in this space for a long time, and now you've become an investor. And I think it's really appropriate to ask you if you're seeing a keenness from companies in your experience to get into this field of the convergence of technology and biology. Are they keen on getting into the space and developing it even further?
So, look, it's, we're talking here about the bleeding edge of the possible, and I think very, very few companies have the courage and the resources to actually pull this off today. And I think it's very much research. But I'll come back to one thing. When we built Siri believe it or not, we built it between 2000 and 2008, right? It's a long time ago. When we built it, we envisioned this very personal AI assistant that Usama was just talking about. This was before all of this stuff has happened in the last couple of years. Now that vision is possible. And it's possible in ways that will make us extraordinarily productive. I'll give you an example. It has nothing to do with AI assistance for personal productivity. Radiology, so CT scans, MRI today, is fully augmented by AI. So the diagnostic augmentation, same thing for biopsy slides, digital pathology. So if that has made it to mission critical functions like healthcare, so identifying diseases, detecting cancer, then for sure it has to make it into our personal augmentation for things like productivity, entertainment, and so on and so forth.
Thank you very much. That brings us to the end of our panel, ladies and gentlemen. Let's give a hand to Usama Fayyad and Antoine Blondeau. Thank you very much.